Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about a topic from section 2.2, which is deciding if a function is odd, even, or neither. So let's start with the explanation of what we're doing. If we are given some function f of x, what we want to do is substitute. We're going to plug in the opposite of x and then evaluate it. So for instance, if I plug in the opposite of x and that gives me the result that I started with, which was f of x, then we say that function is even. If when we plug in negative x or the opposite of x, we get the opposite of the function we started with, we say that is an odd function. And if plugging in the opposite of x gives us neither f of x nor the opposite of f of x, in other words, there's no relationship at all, we say that it is neither. All right, so let's take a look at an example. So let's say we are given f of x equals 2x squared minus 3, and we want to determine if odd, even, or neither. So we begin by plugging in the opposite of x. So we're going to find f of the opposite of x. So we're just going to replace x with the opposite of x everywhere we see it. So this is what it looks like. And now when we evaluate this, recognize this is a -1 here. So we have to square the -1 and the x. So that means we have -1 squared and x squared, and then minus 3. Well, -1 squared is 1. So we have 2 times +1 times x squared. So finally, I get 2 times x squared minus 3. So f of -x excuse me, equals 2x squared minus 3. Now notice if we compare that to where we started, see if I can get my handy dandy highlighter here. So we started out by saying f of x equals 2x squared minus 3. Notice at the end, after substituting in the opposite of x, I get the same thing, the same result. So that tells us then if these are the same, if f of x equals f of the opposite of x, then our function is even. So if it stays the same, it's even. Let's try another example. Let's say we are given f of x equals -3x cubed plus 2x. And I won't write out all the directions, but we will find if it's, I'll abbreviate, find if it's odd, even, or neither. Okay, so remember what we're going to do is find f of the opposite of x. So everywhere there's an x, we fill in -x. And then simplify. So remember that this negative is a -1. So -1 cubed, and then we have x cubed, and then a +2 times a -1x. I think that's easy to follow through and just say -2x. So here I have a -3 times -1 cubed is -1. And you can do this part in your head, but sometimes it helps to write it out. And then -3 times -1 is +3. X cubed minus 2x. So what we have found then is that f of -x equals 3x cubed minus 2x. Now let's compare that to what we have at the beginning. So f of x was the opposite of 3x cubed plus 2x. And what do we have as our result? A +3x cubed and a minus 2x. So what we notice about those is that they are opposites. So in other words, what we have found is that f of x, the opposite of f of x equals f of negative x. So I'll say that the other way. So we found that f of negative x equals the opposite of f of x. In other words, if I took a -1 and multiplied it through my original, that would be my new result. So that means that this is odd. So again, just to make that a little bit more clear, I think I said that a little muddled. What we started with, f of x equals -3x cubed plus 2x. Now, if I multiply by -1, that would give me +3x cubed, and 2x times -1 is -2x. So that multiplying by -1 is what we see here. So again, if you plug in -x, and that result is that you get the opposite of the original, then we know that it is an odd function. Now, I'm not going to do the neither example right now, but just know that when you substitute in -x, or the opposite of x, don't get the same thing, and you don't get the opposite, then it's going to be neither. So again, the even is when you end up with the same function that you had when you started. It's odd if you end up with the opposite, which is what multiplying by -1 does. And then neither is neither of those. So give those a try and let me know if you have more questions.